There's a version of Darragh Ennis that most people watching the chase never actually see. Not the sharp-suited chaser firing back answers before Bradley Walsh can finish the question. A different version. One who, this week, quietly closed a chapter of his life that had run alongside his television career for years, and almost nobody clocked how big that moment really was. To understand why it matters, you have to understand what Darragh was actually juggling behind the scenes. While viewers knew him only as a menace, he was living a strange kind of double life. By day, a lab manager and researcher working in neuroscience, spending his hours around real science, real data, real deadlines that had nothing to do with cameras or studio lights. By evening, or whenever filming allowed, he was one of the most recognizable faces on British tea-time television. Two completely different worlds, somehow held together in one schedule. That's the part that makes this week's news feel bigger than a simple career update. Darragh has now stepped away from that research job entirely. And the reason isn't some dramatic falling out or a sudden loss of passion for science. It's something far more human than that. The lab he worked in relocated from Oxford to Glasgow, and he simply didn't go with it. A part-time academic role that was already difficult to balance became impossible to justify once you add everything else pulling at his time. There's something quietly emotional about that kind of decision. Not a headline-grabbing exit. Not a tearful goodbye on camera. Just a person quietly weighing up a life that had gotten too full and choosing, almost reluctantly, which version of himself to keep. And this is where the phone call comes in. Because in a strange way, it's a phone call from years earlier that set all of this in motion. Long before the lab move, long before the book tour and the podcast, Darragh had appeared on The Chase as a contestant. Just another face in a chair, hoping to win some money. Days later, his phone rang. Producers were on the other end, asking if he'd be interested in becoming a chaser himself. Many viewers who've heard him tell this story since have noticed something almost funny about his first reaction. He nearly didn't believe it. He assumed it was his friends messing with him, pulling one of their usual pranks. It took a moment for it to sink in that this was real, that an offhand appearance on a quiz show was about to reroute the entire direction of his life. It's easy to skim past that detail, but sit with it for a second. One unexpected phone call. One decision to actually answer it and believe what he was hearing. And years later, that decision is the reason a scientist from Rathcoole is doing book signings with queues stretching out the door of a Liverpool bookshop. Because that's really what this week's story is about underneath the surface. Momentum. Once that phone call happened, everything else seemed to follow a slow, almost inevitable path. The television career grew. The public affection grew. New projects, new podcasts, a published book started stacking up around him. And somewhere in that growth, the original job, the one that used to define him, quietly became the hardest thing to keep holding on to. Some fans watching him build this new chapter of his life have wondered whether it was a hard decision for him emotionally, stepping away from science after all those years. Others have pointed out that he doesn't sound like someone mourning a loss. He sounds like someone who's simply being honest about where his time and energy now make the most sense. What makes Darragh compelling to watch isn't just the trivia knowledge. It's this ongoing, very real tension between who he used to be and who he's becoming. A researcher who never fully stopped being a researcher, even while stepping into an entirely different spotlight. Viewers seem drawn to that authenticity, the sense that nothing about his rise feels manufactured or rehearsed. Maybe that's the real reason the story is stuck with people this week. Not because a quiz show chaser changed jobs, but because it's a reminder that sometimes the biggest turning points in a person's life don't arrive with fanfare. They arrive as a 5-minute phone call you almost don't answer in a slow, ongoing decision about which parts of yourself you're finally ready to let go of. What do you think? Would you have taken that phone call or hung up think it was a prank? Let us know in the comments.